Here's how to check an IMEI to make sure you don't get scammed when buying an iPhone. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is go to sickw.com. And when you do, it'll load something like this. Now, if you don't have an account, that's fine. You can definitely scan IMEIs logged out. For example, I can just go incognito here, put one in with no account, paste an IMEI, and I can use this free iPhone carrier check. The only problem with this free check, as you'll see, takes a second to load. It'll tell me these details, but it won't tell me the blacklist status, which is the most important. It actually doesn't tell me iCloud status either. Now, of course, you'd be able to look at the device and figure out if it's iCloud locked as long as the screen was working and you're able to go into the settings. But this is no good, especially if you're buying a bunch of phones. Now, if you're doing a one-off, it's even worse because you don't know if it's blacklisted or not. As phone resellers, blacklist isn't the end of the world for us because we can make about just as much. But for your average Joe checking an IMEI, I would recommend you still make an account on SickW just to be safe. And it's going to cost you 11 cents to do the iPhone carrier, FMI, and blacklist check. It'll only take 2 minutes to make an account, load $1 into the account, and then run your IMEI. Now, if you're a phone flipper like me, you should absolutely be on this already. You should have money loaded in. This is the check I use. I use the FMI and blacklist check. And I'll go ahead and just demo a check here with this one. We can compare the difference. The reason I use this one, and you'll see if you're on this website, there's a million different checks. It might not even be the most perfect one. I see other people using this one frequently though. And it just gives you all the necessary information. As you can see, blacklist status is clean. This one is not activated, not registered. This was a sealed device I bought yesterday. Locked to Verizon. So of course, if it is carrier locked, there always is a risk it will go blacklisted in the future. I always sell carrier locked as parts only for that reason. Now, if you're buying locally and you're just buying one phone, you're watching this guide, that's something to know as well. Although I will say most of this video will be targeted towards phone flippers. Now, in this IMEI checking guide, if you'd like this for yourself to be super safe, you can go to phoneflippers.com/IMEI and get a free copy of this for yourself. But I'll go ahead and go over a few key points because there's a couple nuanced things you want to look out for. I just went over a couple of the big ones, but I'll go over each point in quick detail. Model description. This is, of course, something you want to make sure lines up with what you bought. I've had them before where I was going to buy an iPhone 13 Pro Max, let's say, and it ended up being a 13 Pro. And for some reason, my brain just wasn't working at all. Or maybe it's a 12 Pro Max instead of a 13 Pro Max. They look very similar. And I've accidentally bought it and then realized afterwards, oh, it's the smaller size, or it's actually a model from the year before. Just because I kind of skimmed over this and was looking for the other stuff. Just make sure it's the same model. IMEI, make sure you typed in the right IMEI. So I would just cross-reference with what pops up on your screen. IMEI 2, this isn't very important. Just make sure you have one of them and they both work the exact same way. You can put in both IMEIs and yield the exact same result. The MEID stands for Mobile Equipment Identifier, not important. Serial number also works the same way as the IMEI. It's just a unique number for the device. You could put it in on SickW and it would also pull up the same numbers, same stats. Estimated purchase date. Just look out for anything fishy, but I generally skip over this because there's other ways to identify fishy stuff. Warranty status, if it's under warranty, that might be something of interest to you. iCloud lock is the biggest one because if it's iCloud locked, it's just no good. Of course, you should be able to tell just by looking at the phone. If it hasn't been reset when you go to buy it, check in settings to see if the iCloud's still on there. This will show whether the iCloud account is still on the phone. If it is, there's no way you can get it off without their password, their information, and usually some sort of two-factor authentication. So make sure that's off before you buy. I have it annotated here. It'll show up like this. Now, you can sell iCloud locked devices to direct buyers for all the phone flippers watching this, but it severely changes the price. So make sure it's removed or you know you're buying it as iCloud locked if that's the case. Another thing to note is the iCloud status. So there is a difference between lost mode and clean. Lost mode is going to go for less than clean always. So make note of that as well. A lot of people don't even buy lost mode. So that can be something you end up just getting stuck with if you're not careful with that. Demo unit is another one to look out for. It's very rare you're going to run into a demo unit. And I'd imagine there'd be something noticeable if you did. but demos are definitely no bueno. You're going to want to avoid demos. Of course, just like the iCloud Lock, you can buy demos. You just want to understand that that does devalue the device. So significantly, it's made for demo. It's made to be in a store. Usually that's going to be some sort of stolen phone, unless a company's just liquidating them and somehow you ended up with one. But I'd be very cautious buying demos. Generally, you're not going to be out there looking for demos. If you happen to get one, of course, you can resell it like anything, but there's probably something going on there if you're buying a demo. Loaner device, not really that important. Replace device, also I would say unimportant. Now, a replacement device just shows if the original device was replaced by Apple. In my experience, this doesn't devalue the phone at all. And these are pretty common because a lot of people end up doing the Apple Care repairs, and often Apple will just send them a replacement device depending on the issue. So those are common. Nothing to freak out about if you see a replacement device. Refurbished could mean there's non-Apple parts, which can devalue the phone. You can actually see in settings, if you go to settings, general about, there'll be a parts and service history there. Just be cautious for non-genuine Apple parts, as those are another big devaluer of the device. Apple Care eligible, in my experience, even with a theft and loss package, I don't typically see much more of a return. Devices that have this versus ones that don't. That could just be my own ignorance, not knowing those are more valuable, but I've sold over 1,000 phones. I just don't think it matters that much. Valid purchase date. It verifies if the purchase date meets Apple's validity requirements. Again, generally unimportant, but look out for anything fishy. Activation status indicates whether the device has been activated. Of course, if a sealed device has been activated, I'd be a little cautious and I'd double check to make sure that it hasn't been opened and resealed, something weird like that. Now, it is possible for devices to be activated while still sealed. This happens sometimes. I don't know exactly the nuance of how it works, but sometimes carriers will activate devices. So don't freak out if it is, but I would just look a little bit more closely if you see that it has been activated, been registered, that kind of thing. I noted this here, so that's a good reminder if you end up saving this guide for yourself. Purchase country is something you definitely want to look at. I see so many people buying fakes, and it's not so much the phone flippers, because we've all probably been there once, maybe got burned on one. I actually got burned on one a couple months ago. It was one that didn't turn on, and I thought it was just an aftermarket screen. And then, of course, I realized it was indeed a fake. So even experienced flippers sometimes can get burned. Maybe I'm just an idiot, which is possible too. But if it's Chinese, now I know there's exceptions where this could not be the case. If you live in China, maybe that's different. But I know if you're in the United States, you see Chinese, and you can just tell when these devices are fake. Like I said, the one I bought didn't turn on, so I was just buying it as is. I only paid $60 for it. But be very careful. Oftentimes, the fake ones are always the terabyte. They'll be sealed in box. They'll always be active. Sometimes the iCloud will even show on, and you'll have the purchase country China, and you can just tell something's off by looking at them. The font is a little off, the text alignment, and especially if it's out of the box, you can easily tell with how weird the screen looks. The text is off. You can see it's an Android with the fake Apple interface. So that's something you'll be able to spot for sure. If you're suspicious, there's probably something wrong with it. Locked carrier, this is one of the biggest ones, of course. If people are telling you it's unlocked, you run the IMEI, and it says AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Cricket, whatever. That is not an unlocked device. Sometimes it'll even say no SIM restrictions in the device settings, but on SICW, it'll say carrier locked. And in my experience, SICW is always right. There's ways to manipulate the no SIM restrictions. It's not 100% accurate. SICW has always been 100% accurate for me. So that's not to say maybe it gets it wrong once in a blue moon. I've never seen it. I've scanned over 1,000 IMEIs. I would just trust SICW. So if it says carrier locked, it's carrier locked. SIM lock status, same thing. Very important, as I said. And then, of course, your GSMA report at the bottom. IMEI is just cross-verified. Model name, model number, same thing. The big thing here is the blacklist status. If a phone is blacklisted, and I'm just going to use the United States as an example here. If it's blacklisted in the United States, it will not work with AT&T, Verizon, Cricket, T-Mobile. It won't work with any companies in the United States. One of the cool things about Blacklist is overseas, that doesn't apply. And I don't know how exactly that works, but that's why a lot of Blacklist phones end up overseas. So just exercise caution buying these. Of course, you don't want to be buying stolen phones. You can buy blacklisted. However, just be careful and use your best judgment with that. And understand if you're a buyer buying a blacklisted phone, say you're just a non-phone flipper buying a phone on Marketplace or something to use for yourself, and it's blacklisted, it's essentially just going to be like an iPod or a Wi-Fi only iPad. You're not going to be able to get cellular on it. It'll work on Wi-Fi, but you won't be making calls, sending texts, anything like that. At least not with the official Apple apps. You'd have to use some other sort of messaging app to circumvent that, get around that somehow. General list status, I've actually never seen this be anything. If it was on one, it'd probably be blacklisted anyways. That would be probably not good if it was on some sort of list. Most important things to summarize all this: model, carrier lock, iCloud lock, and blacklist status. If you get those down, you're probably fine. Of course, the fakes are important to note too. So if you're suspicious and you see it's a Chinese device, avoid at all costs. These are just going around on Marketplace nonstop. I think it's because people get scammed. And they're like, well, I got to get my money back, so I'm just going to get the next guy, make it not my problem. And these devices never get off Marketplace, unfortunately. So avoid the fakes. Use your best judgment when buying. And remember, model, carrier lock, iCloud lock, and blacklist status. Those are your main ones. Make sure to check the IMEI every time, especially if you're a phone flipper, because it seems like every time you don't, you end up getting burnt. I remember when I was just starting, I would get a little lazy sometimes for whatever reason. And whenever I would do that, it was always blacklisted, always had some sort of issue. And this was before I knew how to get back a lot of money for stuff like that. So ended up really burning me every time I didn't do that. Just take the time, check, scan for your key things, about 15 seconds, and you're going to avoid a lot of trouble in the future.